December 1966. Deep in the jungle near Long Tan in Phuoc Thu Province, monsoon rain crushed through the triple canopy as 5 Australian SAS soldiers lay frozen in the undergrowth. They had not moved, they had not spoken, they had not breathed any louder than the rain itself 15 meters away. A Viet Cong supply column moved past them, boots, rifles, whispers. None of it detected the Australians watching from the mud for 6 hours. The patrol remained perfectly still. Then the radio came alive. An American liaison officer broke silence to request a position update. The sound cut through the jungle like a gunshot. 37 enemy soldiers turned toward the noise. Australians survived what followed, but 3 Viet Cong escaped. And those 3 were enough. After 9 days of flawless stealth, the patrol aborted, not because of enemy skill, but because of 15 seconds of allied radio protocol. By 1971, Australian SAS units were achieving kill ratios exceeding 100 to 1, while suffering only 2 combat deaths. American Special Forces operating in the same regions averaged closer to 6 to 1. Pentagon dismissed the numbers as exaggerated. Analysts called the methodology unsustainable. Commanders declared it incompatible with modern warfare. They were wrong, because what happened between these allied forces exposed a fundamental truth about war. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one in front of you, but the one standing beside you. With a radio after 1967, elite Australian soldiers quietly refused to operate alongside American ground units, not out of arrogance, not out of rivalry, but out of necessity. The reason was silence, and in the jungles of Vietnam, silence was more powerful than firepower. The Long Tan incident was not unique. It repeated again and again wherever Australian SAS operated near American forces. The pattern was always the same. Australians inserted by helicopter with surgical precision, moved for hours through hostile terrain without a sound. They established observation posts refined through decades of jungle warfare. Then, American units arrived. Helicopters thundered overhead. Door guns fired suppressive bursts. Radios crackled constantly. Movement through vegetation sounded like armored columns. American units often never knew Australians were nearby, but they compromised Australian positions. All the same, operations collapsed, risks skyrocketed, and Australian frustration hardened into doctrine. The problem was not competence, it was philosophy. American Special Forces doctrine in 1966 revolved around mobility, firepower, and communication. Recon teams existed to find the enemy, then call in overwhelming support artillery. Airstrikes, gunships, constant radio contact was essential. Position updates, command coordination, aviation deconflictions. System assumed technological dominance would win every fight. Often it did, but not in the environment where Australians fought Australian. SAS doctrine was forged elsewhere. New Guinea, Malaya, Borneo. 20 years of jungle warfare taught them one lesson above all others. Noise meant death. Stealth was not a preference. It was survival. Australian patrols inserted deep into enemy territory. For weeks they operated under radio silence. They observed patiently. They struck only when advantage was absolute. Then they vanished. Their strength came from denying the enemy any awareness of their presence, until it was too late. These two systems were logical on their own. Together they were catastrophic. Americans communicated constantly. Australians assumed every transmission was intercepted. Americans moved by day and defended by night. Australians moved at night and vanished by day. Americans built fire bases and cleared landing zones. Australians operated where helicopters could not land and never returned. At the center of it all was noise. Discipline for Australian SAS silence was sacred. Every sound was controlled. Weapons were wrapped. Equipment was tied down. Movement was rehearsed until it was soundless. Hand signals replaced speech. Radios stayed silent, even when communication would have helped, because once detected, you were already dead. American forces viewed noise differently. Communication was safety, radio traffic meant support. Noise was acceptable because firepower erased consequences. That assumption failed where Australians operated. Breaking point came in February 1967. An Australian patrol had spent 6 days observing a Viet Cong base. The intelligence would shape a major operation then. American helicopters inserted a separate reconnaissance team 3 kilometers away. Loud, aggressive standard procedure. The Viet Cong went on full alert security. Doubled patrols surged. The Australian patrol extracted with incomplete intelligence. The operation was cancelled. Australians filed formal complaints. Americans replied that coordination had occurred at headquarters. The Australian response was blunt. Headquarters meant nothing when the enemy was listening for Australians. Coordination meant informing soldiers on the ground. For Americans, it meant planning cells and command approval. Both made sense. They could not coexist. The radio symbolized everything too. Americans, it was a lifeline. To Australians, it was a death sentence. Australian patrols deployed for 2 weeks with 3 transmissions. Total insertion confirmation. Critical intelligence report. Extraction request. Nothing else. American liaison officers interpreted the silence as negligence. They could not understand that silence was the weapon. Australian training enforced this ruthlessly. Candidates failed for a single careless sound. Noise discipline was drilled until it became identity. Americans trained for flexibility, firepower, and communication. Excellent soldiers, different instincts. Americans could be quiet when needed. Australians could not be loud even if they tried. Risk was handled differently. Americans relied on support. Australians relied on invisibility. If Americans made contact, firepower solved it. If Australians made contact, they vanished. No helicopters, no artillery, no rescue. Mistakes were fatal, so mistakes were eliminated. August 1967 shattered any illusion of compatibility. An Australian patrol watched a critical trail junction. An American patrol unknowingly entered the same area. The American point man passed within 5 meters of the Australians. Never saw them. Then the radio came on clear language. Exact position within an hour. The Viet Cong attacked. 2 Americans died. 4 were wounded. The Australians covered the withdrawal without being detected, then aborted their mission. The after-action review exploded. Australians demanded accountability. Americans defended procedure. Silence versus structured ground. Truth versus headquarters logic. An informal Australian policy emerged. Assume American presence equals compromise. By late 1967, Australian SAS had effectively stopped joint ground operations. They coordinated territory, shared intelligence, but never patrolled together. The separation was survival. Helicopters reinforced the divide. For Americans, they meant mobility. For Australians, they meant exposure. Australians minimized helicopter used night insertions. No resupply, no routine evacuation. They carried everything, accepted the risk. The trade was worth it. By March 1968, the final break occurred. 2 weeks of Australian surveillance prepared a decisive strike. An American sweep nearby alerted the enemy. The base emptied overnight. The Australian report was merciless. From that point forward, Australian SAS operated independently. The results were immediate higher success. Better intelligence, greater enemy hesitation captured. Documents revealed Viet Cong fear. Silence meant Australians. Quiet jungles meant death. 120 Australian operators tied down thousands of enemy soldiers. Not with firepower, but uncertainty. The enemy never knew where they were, so they assumed they were everywhere. That fear reshaped operations. American forces fought reactively with overwhelming force. Australians fought proactively with invisibility. Both approaches worked. They could never coexist. Australians proved that silence could achieve what firepower could not. And in the jungles of Vietnam, the deadliest sound was no sound at all.